Hello and welcome. Let's look at how oxygen and carbon dioxide are transported in the blood throughout the body. 97% of oxygen is transported by RBCs bound to hemoglobin, and 3% of oxygen is transported as dissolved in plasma. 70% of carbon dioxide is transported as bicarbonate, 20 to 25% is transported by the RBCs bound to hemoglobin, and 7% of carbon dioxide is transported dissolved in plasma. So let's discuss transport of oxygen first. We already know that 97% of oxygen is transported by the RBCs bound to the hemoglobin, also known as oxyhemoglobin. Each molecule of hemoglobin is made up of 4 polypeptide subunits, that is 2 alpha globin chains and 2 beta globin chains. Each unit contains a heme molecule, so there are 4 heme molecules in hemoglobin, and each molecule of hemoglobin contains iron in ferrous form. This is not an actual diagram of hemoglobin but just a representation. So as we saw, there are 4 globin chains, 2 alpha globin chains and 2 beta globin chains, and each chain contains a heme molecule with iron. So there are 4 domains where oxygen molecule can attach. Therefore, one molecule of hemoglobin can carry 4 molecules of oxygen. This binding of oxygen to hemoglobin is reversible. The way oxygen attaches to hemoglobin is quite interesting. It is called as cooperative binding or positive cooperativity. It reminds me of my school days. After school, if someone would get in the bus early, he would reserve seats for his friends and his group, so they would get a seat easily even if they are late to climb the bus. Oxygen molecules have similar friendship when it comes to binding with hemoglobin. When first molecule of oxygen binds to hemoglobin, it causes changes in hemoglobin molecule, which makes it easier for the second molecule of oxygen to bind. So when these two are bound to hemoglobin, they bring about further changes which makes it easier for the third molecule to bind, and these 3 molecules make it very easy for the fourth molecule of oxygen to bind to hemoglobin. Now let us try to understand the relationship of partial pressure of oxygen and the quantity of oxygen combined with hemoglobin. This is expressed by the oxygen dissociation curve. The horizontal axis is the partial pressure of oxygen and the vertical axis is the % saturation of hemoglobin by oxygen. And when we plot this graph, it gives a sigmoid shaped curve, also called as an S-shaped curve. The sigmoid shaped curve indicates that initially binding of hemoglobin and oxygen increases with increase in partial pressure of oxygen. This part of the curve is steep, which indicates that even small increase in PaO2 increases saturation of hemoglobin with oxygen. But after a certain point, increase in PaO2 does not result in increase in saturation of hemoglobin, and the curve becomes flat. This is because all the hemoglobin molecules are saturated with oxygen. The school bus is full now. There are no more empty seats. Now there are certain factors which affect the binding of oxygen to hemoglobin, like partial pressure of oxygen, partial pressure of carbon dioxide, hydrogen ion concentration, and temperature. Before going any further, we need to understand that at the level of the lungs, where oxygen is continuously diffusing from the alveoli into the pulmonary capillaries, we need the affinity between oxygen and hemoglobin to be high, so that more and more oxygen molecules can be taken up by hemoglobin. And at the level of the tissues, we want this affinity between oxygen and hemoglobin to be lower, so that hemoglobin can lose this oxygen and the oxygen can be delivered to the tissues. So let's look at a scenario where PO2 is high, PCO2, hydrogen ion concentration and temperature are low. This results in left shift of the sigmoid curve. If you look at the graph, you can see the green dotted line indicating the left shift. This results in more saturation of hemoglobin by oxygen for a given PO2. In other words, we can say that hemoglobin's affinity for oxygen has increased. This scenario happens normally in the lungs. Again, let's look at another scenario. Now PO2 is low, but PCO2, hydrogen ion concentration and temperature are high. Yes, you have guessed it right. This happens at the level of the tissues and it results in right shift of the oxygen dissociation curve, which means that the affinity of hemoglobin to the oxygen is decreased and it results in delivery of oxygen to the tissues. So I have written these factors again to recap. At the level of alveoli, PO2 is high and other factors are low. This results in left shift of the oxygen dissociation curve, and it means that the affinity of hemoglobin for oxygen is increased, so more and more oxygen is taken up by the hemoglobin. And at the level of tissues, PO2 is low while other factors like PCO2, hydrogen ion concentration and temperature are high. It results in right shift of the oxygen dissociation curve, which means that the affinity of hemoglobin for oxygen is low and it results in delivery of oxygen to the tissues. Now let's look at transport of carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is produced by the cells of our body. This carbon dioxide has to be taken from different tissues and organs and delivered to the lungs, where it diffuses into the alveoli and is then expired out. 20 to 25% of carbon dioxide is transported by RBCs bound to hemoglobin. When carbon dioxide binds to hemoglobin, it is called as carbaminohemoglobin. This binding of carbon dioxide to hemoglobin is related to partial pressure of carbon dioxide, and the major factor affecting this binding is partial pressure of oxygen. At the level of tissues, PCO2 is high and PO2 is low. This results in increase in binding of carbon dioxide to hemoglobin. That is, it increases affinity of hemoglobin for carbon dioxide. And at the level of alveoli, PCO2 is low and PO2 is high, which results in increased dissociation of carbon dioxide from hemoglobin, which means that hemoglobin's affinity for carbon dioxide is decreased and there is unloading of carbon dioxide from the hemoglobin. This carbon dioxide then diffuses into the alveoli and is then expired out. Second method of transport is as bicarbonate. 70% of carbon dioxide is transported as bicarbonate. Enzyme carbonic anhydrase is present in high concentration in RBCs. This enzyme catalyzes the reactions where carbon dioxide and water are converted into carbonic acid, and carbonic acid is then converted into bicarbonate and hydrogen ion. And these reactions are reversible reactions. So let's see what happens at the level of the tissues. As we all know that cells are continuously producing carbon dioxide. This carbon dioxide diffuses into the capillaries due to the concentration gradient and then enter the RBCs. The enzyme carbonic anhydrase converts this carbon dioxide and water into carbonic acid and then converts carbonic acid into bicarbonate and hydrogen ions. Hydrogen ion is a proton. We know that increase in protons will reduce the pH of the blood. That is, it will make it more acidic. So to maintain the blood pH, reduced hemoglobin accepts this hydrogen ion and acts as a buffer. And bicarbonate which is formed is removed from the RBC by an ion channel, which is a bicarbonate chloride exchanger. This ion channel pumps bicarbonate out of the RBC and chloride into the RBC. This maintains electrical neutrality as a negative ion like bicarbonate is replaced by another negative ion chloride. By this removal of bicarbonate from RBC, more carbon dioxide can be converted by carbonic anhydrase into bicarbonate. As blood is continuously circulating in the blood vessels, this blood containing the plasma and RBCs reaches the lungs. We all know that oxygen is in high concentration in the lungs. This oxygen enters into the RBCs and binds to the hemoglobin. This binding of oxygen to the hemoglobin results in release of hydrogen ion or release of proton. So the ion channel, which is the bicarbonate chloride exchanger, starts working again. But now it is pumping bicarbonate inside the RBCs and chloride out of the RBCs. The enzyme carbonic anhydrase now works in reverse direction. It converts hydrogen ion and bicarbonate to carbonic acid and then converts carbonic acid to carbon dioxide and water. carbon dioxide diffuses out of the RBCs into the pulmonary capillaries and then diffuses into the alveoli, and then it is expired out. At the level of tissues, the pumping of chloride in the RBCs and removal of bicarbonate outside is called as chloride shift, and is also called as Hamburger phenomena. And at the level of the lungs, where chloride is removed from the RBCs and bicarbonate is taken in, it is called as the reverse chloride shift. And lastly, 7% of carbon dioxide is transported dissolved in plasma. Every 100 ml of oxygenated blood reaching the tissues provides 5 ml of oxygen to the tissues, and for every 100 ml of deoxygenated blood reaching the alveoli, 4 ml of carbon dioxide diffuses into the alveoli. We can calculate these numbers, but I don't think from the exam point of view we are required to know the calculation of these numbers. Regulation of respiration. Our respiratory rhythm changes with the needs of the body. If a person is sitting and then he gets up and starts running, then when he is running, his breathing changes accordingly. It becomes faster and deeper. As per the requirements of the body, respiratory rhythm changes, and this is controlled by the central nervous system. The rhythm center is situated in the medulla. It is indicated by the blue color in the diagram. And pneumotaxic center is situated in the pons. It is indicated by the red color in the diagram. We will discuss about nervous system in the chapter neural control, but just to give you a brief overview, human brain is divided into forebrain, midbrain and hindbrain. The hindbrain is made up of 3 parts: pons, medulla and cerebellum. This is the pons. Pons then continues below as medulla, and cerebellum is behind the pons. So to repeat again, the rhythm center is present in the medulla and the pneumotaxic center is present in the pons. The pneumotaxic center has inhibitory effect on the rhythm center. It is like a stop button. When the rhythm center gets activated, it sends signals to the diaphragm and the external intercostal muscles, and they start contracting and inspiration begins. When enough inspiration has taken place, pneumotaxic center gets activated and it inhibits the rhythm center. So when the rhythm center is inhibited, no more signals are going to the muscles. So because of which diaphragm and external intercostal muscles relax and expiration begins. The pneumotaxic center therefore can reduce the duration of inspiration and hence alter the respiratory rate. Now a few words about chemoreceptors. Chemoreceptors or chemosensitive area are specialized area which can sense changes in concentration of carbon dioxide and hydrogen ions in blood. Central chemoreceptor is present near the rhythm center as marked by the green color in the diagram, and as I said before, it is sensitive to changes in carbon dioxide and hydrogen ion concentration in the blood. When concentration of carbon dioxide and hydrogen ion increases in the blood, this area recognizes it and sends signals to the respiratory rhythm center, so that the rhythm center can alter the respiratory rhythm and eliminate more carbon dioxide from the body. Peripheral chemoreceptors are present in the carotid body, which is present in the carotids, and the aortic body, which is present in the arch of aorta. They also sense changes in carbon dioxide and hydrogen ion concentration and send signals to the rhythm center for it to take necessary action. As we have seen, oxygen does not play an important role in regulation of respiratory rhythm. This brings us to the end of the chapter. I have discussed disorders in the MCQs. Have a good day and thank you for your patient hearing.